Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Coffee on the Coast. I'm your host today, Tina Prigge, delighted to be joined by Julia Lee from the award-winning Manitowoc Public Library. Julia, welcome back to Coffee on the Coast. How's everything going?
Oh my gosh, it's going so well, Tina. I'm so happy to be here. It's finally starting to feel like spring. I'm getting excited.
Me too, and especially because our topic today is definitely a spring kind of topic. We're going to be talking about foraging in your own lawn. So, Julia, you were telling me that there are things in our own lawn, in the grass growing right outside of our houses, that you can eat. Tell me more.
Oh my gosh, I'd love to. I love talking about plants and learning about plants. So years ago, I actually worked at an organic food co-op and we sold dandelion root for a pretty penny. And I thought to myself, dandelion, like the weed. And then I started being curious about what other plants are out there that I could just eat. And the more I learned, the more fascinated I was. And so there are plants in your own backyard that are not only free, it's like a free buffet, but there's some really great medicinal plants out there. For example, my favorite, I was telling you, Tina, before the show, if I got a tattoo of anything, it'd be a dandelion. That's how much I love them. Like, dandelions are not only a great food crop, but they are high in potassium and iron. They actually have, I believe, per ounce more potassium than a banana and per ounce more iron than beef. They are really powerful little plants, and they're very versatile. The three plants that I'm going to go over, you can't really see, the three plants I'm going to go over in my first introductory foraging virtual class, which is going to be on March 18th, are some really common ones that I bet at least one of them are going to be in your lawn this spring. We're going to go over dandelions, which is one of my favorites. It's a powerhouse of foraging. We're going to go over violets, and we're going to go over something called wild plantain, which is a really powerful medicinal herb. I guarantee you, when you see these pictures, you're going to be like, I have that. I pulled that out of my garden last year. So it's really incredible. And I chose these three plants because they are super easy to identify, because to me, when I first started foraging, I was really intimidated. I was like, I'm going to poison myself. I'm going to misidentify something. I was really nervous. So I started off with the dandelion. Everybody knows what a dandelion looks like. You can identify it on sight. And the best part is, unlike some plants, every part of the dandelion is edible. And every part of the dandelion has a different use. And there are different recipes for the leaves, for the flowers, and for the roots. So it's one of my favorites, and it's plentiful. So if you have a backyard or a green space has not been sprayed by pesticides, that's a big one. I do want to emphasize, you want to make sure wherever you're foraging is not by the road, is not by a railroad, just because it could pick up those pollutants. So if you have a green space, that has not been sprayed by pesticides, you can start foraging this spring for these common plants and start eating them, which is the greatest. My tagline is, if you can't beat them, eat them.
And so you're saying that dandelions are much more than just dandelion wine, that you can use all parts of the dandelion?
Yes, absolutely. So some of my favorite recipes, I dig up roots. Generally in the fall is when you dig up the roots, but I've dug them up in the spring as well. You can roast them and they make a coffee or tea replacer. And they taste, depending on how you roast them, they can taste really sweet. And my husband's favorite recipe I use for that is Dandelion Chai. So I just use the roasted roots, some spices, some honey, some milk, and it's really good for digestion. You can buy dandelion tea that's supposed to be really good for digestion, but why buy it when it's in your backyard for free? You can use the leaves. I especially use a lot of the dandelion leaves in the spring because after it gets hot, they get a little more bitter. I don't mind bitter greens, but they're sweeter in the spring. You can use them in soups, in stews. You can use them to replace kale in recipes. I really like to use a little bit of olive oil and saute them up and just eat them. Oh, they're so good. And sauteing sweetens them up, so it gets rid of any hints of that bitterness. And then the flowers are the most fun part. The flowers and the petals kind of taste like honey. They're sweet on their own. So I use them. I make dandelion lemonade every summer. It adds a really nice floral honey flavor to the lemonade. I've made dandelion wildflower cookies, and I was kind of telling you a fun story about my niece. I made wildflower cookies for all my sisters this past Mother's Day. And then my sister was telling me my 9-year-old niece was going around and telling her friends that her aunt gave her weed cookies. And I was like, no. Wildflower cookies. Let's call them wildflower cookies. But they make great additions addition to baked goods, because they add that honey, that subtle honey sweetness, and it just is delicious. You can make dandelion lemon bars. I mean, there are so many dandelion recipes. And the best thing is, like I said, they're really plentiful. So my neighbors are very tolerant people. I'm that person like taking the dandelion seeds and blowing them around my yard, and I'm like, yes, more seeds in my yard. Because they just provide so much great food. Violets, you can oftentimes find wood violets. They're native to Wisconsin, and they do.
You can eat violets? I had no idea.
Oh, they're great to just sprinkle on a salad. You can just have and they make the salad look beautiful. You can make violet lemonade, which is cool because it has that purpley color to it. You can make violet tea. I've made violet simple syrup. So it kind of is fancy, and I've used them in my wildflower cookies as well. So they add a nice pop of color and that flowery sweetness. So good. And then that wild plantain is a very powerful medicinal herb. I stepped on a hornet's nest this past summer. I got stung multiple times on my leg, and what helped the most was I crushed that wild plantain and made a poultice, and it actually helps pull the venom out of the stings. And so it really helped alleviate that pain and swelling. And it's just a weed in my backyard. So for any gardeners out there who spend all your time weeding, I spend so much less time weeding now because I'm like, oh, I can eat that. Oh, I can eat that. Oh, I can eat that. I'm just going to leave it go and then eat it.
Right. Well, and how good to know too that like the solution, for example, to being stung by a hornet or a wasp could be right there in your yard at the ready to provide that relief.
Yeah, and I was trying baking soda. I was trying, they said put milk on it. Nothing was working. I was like, okay, I've heard of wild plantain. I was ready to try anything at that point, and it was almost instant relief. It was incredible how quick it worked, and it was just something in my backyard. So I'm like spreading the news about wild plantain.
It seems like this knowledge has been lost, right? Like I feel like this would have been definitely known and practiced in times gone by, and it seems like maybe we've just gotten so, modernized that we've sort of forgotten what's right at our fingertips, right in our lawn.
Yes, and I've done a lot of surprise. I've done a lot of research about this because I was curious, like, how have we, if these plants are so amazing, how have we as a culture forgotten about this? And it seems to trace back to the 1950s lawn culture. So back in the 1950s, that perfect American lawn without any blemish, that it was, cut at a certain height and was only made of one type of grass, that became the ideal that you aspired for. It kind of became tied into the ideal of the American dream. So if you had a perfect lawn and 2.5 kids and that perfect house, then you were at the top of the status ladder, So the herbs that we now call weeds became really undesirable because then you were seen as like some country bumpkin. You weren't seen as, cool as your neighbor. You weren't keeping up with the Joneses. So people started spraying poisons on their lawn to get rid of these really beneficial plants in place of this status symbol. So that's where it seems like it all ties back to where we really started losing our cultural knowledge about these plants. And I'm hoping that I can convince some people, instead of spraying your plants, eat them, make a salad out of them, and join me in just kind of discovering the biodiversity and celebrating the biodiversity of our areas.
Absolutely. Mary just commented that she uses wild chamomile for making tea, which she loves.
Awesome. If she knows where some wild chamomile is, she might have to hook me up because that's a wonderful source. And
do share your secrets, Mary.
Yeah. And it's just wonderful. The more people you talk to, the more you realize how many other foragers are out there. So, and it's something that is, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have any special tools. I use trowels from my garden. I use buckets. I kind of use whatever I have on hand. All you have to do is, do your research, know the plants you're identifying, and be responsible. One thing I always say is, you want to leave some for the pollinators. These dandelions are great for you, but remember, you're not the only animal who relies on them for food. And I'll talk all about that, the sustainability, best foraging practice tips, a little bit of the history of foraging, and the benefits of foraging that go just beyond the food you can gather. So foraging, there's so many reasons to try it. If you've never tried it before, I really encourage you to log on March 18th and join us for that intro to foraging. I'll introduce those really basic plants that, like I said, we'll start off with the dandelion, super safe plant to start with. Almost everyone can identify it. And who knows, you might learn a new favorite hobby.
How cool, you guys. So Julia is going to be talking about foraging your lawn. This is edible and medicinal plants in your own backyard. And there's going to be 2 different events. Now, each of these dates, the content is different. So first is March 18th, and that's at 6:30 p.m. virtual on the Manitowoc Public Library Facebook page. And then the second one is April 1st at 6:30 p.m. on the Manitowoc Public Library Facebook page. And you'll want to attend both of these.
Yeah. So the first one, thank you for mentioning that. So the first one's going to be an intro to foraging, why we want to forage, a little background history. And then I'll introduce those first three basic plants, dandelion, wild violet, and the wild plantain. And then the second course, we're going to do a little bit of introduction, but I'm going to introduce even more of my favorite plants. And they're all going to be easy to identify. There's not going to be any poisonous lookalikes for these. And they're going to be ones that you can find in your own backyard to get you started on your foraging journey.
So, Julia, this is so fantastic. You always bring so much knowledge to this show. I just absolutely love it. And this is a whole new, cool concept, which actually isn't new at all, right? You're drawing on like old lore, but it's like made new again, introducing the world again to this important information of what's right in our lawns and available to us. And what a great topic as we enter spring. And I just wanted to say that Mary had one more comment. She grew up in the country and always went berry picking. And like you said, there is stuff that you can eat and can't eat.
Yes, awesome. And it's so great when you have a family and someone who can pass down that knowledge to you. So Mary, that's really wonderful that your dad showed you all those edible plants and the safety tips of what not to eat, because that's equally important. Absolutely. That's really wonderful.
Right. So tune in because Julia Lee is going to help you get started. Again, it's called Foraging Your Lawn. It's a virtual event, March 18th, and again, April 1st at 6:30 p.m. Can't wait to watch it. Julia, thank you so much for joining us on Coffee on the Coast. Looking forward to next time. Take care.
Thanks so much, Tina.